Welcome. It's Peter Norman Day, the 9th of October 2019. A few hours ago this place was buzzing with official guests for the official unveiling of the Peter Norman statue. So what? Who's Peter Norman? What's Peter Norman done? Why do so few people in Australia celebrate it and so many celebrate it in the United States of America? I'll give you some background. Peter Norman was born in Melbourne in the early 1950s. I should say in the 1940s. He was a champion athlete. I know we produce champion athletes all the time, but he was extraordinary for a very good reason, which we'll go into in a minute. In 1968, his coach Neville Stiltoe and Peter Norman were part of history. While his coach Neville Stiltoe watched the 1968 Olympic 200 metres final on a grainy television set in a school classroom he was teaching, Peter Norman did the impossible on that day. At the Mexico Olympics in 1968, he came second in the 200 metres, setting a record of 20.06 seconds, a record that has never been beaten by an Australian in this country in the last 51 years. That's extraordinary when you think about it. An athletics record that has stood for 51 years. Now, if Peter Norman was an athlete, we would have forgotten about him years ago. There are many great athletes in this country, many great athletes in many areas of sport. But Peter Norman did something extraordinary in Mexico in 1968. Something which has finally been acknowledged 51 years later in front of his mother, in front of his coach, Neville Stiltoe, in front of his daughters, in front of his son, in front of his family, in front of many people, official guests. I was one, being the convener of the Peter Norman Commemoration Committee. But the important thing to remember is, why were there so many people here today? Why is the 9th of October designated Peter Norman Day? When Peter Norman spoke to Tommy Smith, who was the gold medalist, and John Carlos, who was the bronze medalist, both Afro-Americans, when he spoke to them, they asked him, did he believe in God? And he said yes. Did he believe in universal human rights? And he said yes. They told him what they were going to do at the Olympics. They told him they were part of the Olympic Project for Human Rights. And John Carlos and Tommy Smith told him what they were going to do. They were going to make a protest on the dais at the medal presentation. And he said to them, I will stand with you. And I'll say those words again. 5 little words that are so important in human history and the human future and the human present. I will stand with you. And on the way to the medal presentation, he asked one of the other American athletes for his Olympic Project for Human Rights badge, which you can see he's wearing above his silver medal on the left side of his body. And he stood there, eyes fixed, while Tommy Smith and John Carlos raised their hands in the Black Power salute. Tommy Smith had a black leather glove on his right hand. John Carlos had a black leather glove on his left hand. What had happened is, in the confusion to get to the dais, John Carlos forgot his black leather gloves, and Peter Norman suggested they each wear one glove. And that image of Peter Norman there, a white man, standing between two black men on the Olympic dais in 1968 is one of the most iconic images of the 20th century. And it's iconic because it highlights how important it is to stand with those who are oppressed. Peter Norman could have walked away. He could have walked away. He didn't walk away. And he paid an extreme price for not walking away. Although he qualified 5 times to run in the 1972 Olympic Games in Munich, he was refused permission to run by the Australian Athletics Association because of what he had done in 1968. And in the year 2000, while the country was celebrating the Olympic Games in Sydney, the Australian Olympic Committee refused to invite Peter Norman to the Games. Was it an oversight? Was it a snub? When the American track and field group arrived from the United States in Sydney, they rang Peter. They said, "Why aren't you here, Peter?" And Peter said, "I haven't got an invitation." So they invited him, and he stayed with the American Track and Field Association in their quarters at the Sydney Olympics as their guest. He died a saddened, heartbroken man in 2006. He died suddenly. And Tommy Smith and John Carlos had so much faith in this man, they came to Melbourne, the United States, attended his funeral in Coburg, and they acted as pallbearers on the day. And the American Track and Field Association declared at his funeral that the 9th of October would forever be celebrated in the United States of America as Peter Norman Day. And 6 years ago, we formed the Peter Norman Commemoration Committee, because nowhere in this country were people celebrating the achievements of Peter Norman. Not just his sporting achievements, but more importantly, his human rights stand. I will stand for you. And the erection of this statue goes a short way to redress the injustice that he suffered while he was alive, because he had the audacity to stand up with those who are oppressed. The story of Peter Norman is not just an athletic story. And if you come to the monument with your family and your children and your friends, and I encourage you to come and read the documentation, you will notice that it's presented as a great moment in Olympic history. This is a great moment in human history, because what Peter Norman did is what we can all do. Because what his example is what we should all do. Every day, each and every one of us find ourselves in a situation where we see injustice. And in the majority of cases, me included, we walk away. We turn our heads. We close our eyes. We say it's none of my business. You see somebody homeless in the street, you turn your head. You see somebody being abused on a tram, you turn your head. You see some politician make some outrageous remark based on race, you turn your head. You see the mass media and the corporate-owned media and the government-gelded ABC make the most outrageous comments about groups of people because of the behaviour of a small minority, and we turn our heads. What Peter Norman demonstrated is that although there is a price to pay, we need to stand up. We need to say, I will stand with you when we see injustice occurring. Not just injustice occurring at that very moment, but injustice occurring over a period of time. As we've seen with Indigenous Australians, as we've seen with our First Nations people, as we've seen with immigrants, as we've seen with different waves of immigrants, as we've seen with people on social security benefits who are vilified, marginalised, ostracised because they can't get a job or they have to rely on social security benefits to survive. Words like dole bludgeon, welfare check, welfare, and the list goes on and on. Every day we are surrounded by example of injustice on a wide variety of fields. Personal injustice, one-to-one, injustice towards groups of people who are different, who wear different clothes, who have maybe a different gender orientation, who have different sexual preference, who look different, who wear funny clothes, and the list goes on and on. And then we have injustice which occurs on a mass scale, which we see promoted by the corporate-owned media and to a lesser extent the government-gelded ABC, which does its best to vilify and ostracise large numbers of groups. Like trade unionists, to be a trade unionist in 2020 is almost to be a criminal. To be a recipient of social security benefits is to be a criminal. To be somebody who wears burqa is to be some type of threat, and the list goes on and on and on. So you've got individual injustice, you've got institutionalised injustice, and then you've got government injustice, where we see the emergence of political movements and political parties with representation in all levels of government, local, state and federal, who use inequality, who use difference as their bargaining chip, as their rallying cry, as their dog whistling. So what Peter Norman demonstrated to each and every one of us is that we need to stand up. He stood up, he paid the price, but 51 years after he made that stand, he is now recognised as a great Australian, as one of the sporting greats of this country, as one of the great humanitarians of this country, not because he won a silver medal, not because his 200-metre record still stands in this country, not because of the work he did as a teacher, but because of that stand he took on that dais, on that day in Mexico City in 1968. I implore you to be Peter Norman. You can be Peter Norman. And if you're not Peter Norman, nobody else is. Ultimately, it's personal responsibility that's important. We are all responsible for the type of society we create. And if we turn our heads, if we close our eyes, if we put our hands over our ears, if we refuse to acknowledge what's happening around us, we deserve to be humiliated, vilified, ostracised and legislated away. So, Peter Norman, on Peter Norman Day, I congratulate you on your stand, and what you did will live throughout human history, not as a sport and achievement, but as an achievement of a man who believed in universal human rights.